Okay, so let's dive into part two of the speeding up your workflow efficiency talk, which we started a little bit ago. In this one, I want to start talking a little bit more about the tools and some workflow kind of stuff. All right, we'll talk inside of that a little bit about the masks and the layers and separation and so forth. We'd already talked about the templates, but mostly tools is something that I want to um, get across to you here. Now again, this is going to be inside of Photoshop. You can do some of these things inside of Procreate as well, especially when we're talking about masking or clipping masks, um, custom brushes, perhaps custom patterns. I'm not as fluent inside of Procreate, but uh, if you know those programs, which I'm not hyper familiar with them, then you might be able to find an equivalent to what I'm talking about. Again, Photoshop is what I'm going to be using. Photoshop is also currently the industry standard, which is why I'm going to be um, talking about that currently. Okay. So, as we looked at our last guy here, we have this little sketch that I imported. You can see over here that on the right hand side in the layers that I've broken it up into background colors and a PIM color. So PIM again is the character. We could break this up into multiple layers, but I'm going to show you how we can do it all inside of one. For me, it really just depends on the needs of the client or the needs of the illustration, right? The asset. What are we doing with it? In this particular case, I think separating out background from character will be more than enough. And I'll be able to show you the tools as we go, or a large portion of them. So if I have these guys, you can see if I turn off background, nothing happens, and I have a lines layer. Okay, my lines layer currently is set up to multiply, as you can see on the right hand side. That way, even though the lines layer has a white background, the only thing that will be applied is the black portion, so it'll kind of bake itself on top of everything that I put underneath. All right, so that's a nice way to start setting up your document. You can see that I also already have my guides set up. Now for this particular application, since there's not going to be text, I'm not super worried about the use of the guides. I'm going to hit Control semicolon to get rid of those. All right. So when I start off, I tend to like to consider what the main colors of this environment are going to be. So one, it's not a hack, it's not at all, it's just planning. One thing that I like to do is I'll come in and I'll grab a handful of colors. If I have a group of swatches already picked out, let's say that because this is going to be a kid's book, well, we're assuming it's going to be a kid's book. It's not going to be anything except an example, obviously. But let's say that this is going to be a kid's book. Often you're using pastel level colors. So let's say that I'm going to do this in maybe like a watercolor style. So I would come in and I would create a slightly larger brush, and I would start laying down some swatches, and this is going to be my swatches layer. And what this is going to do is allow me to create a couple swatches, little color dabs, to allow me to pick back and forth at a few, like I said, swatches that I can keep consistent. Right now, obviously these are coming out of this swatch library, so it's not rocket science for me to come up here and just repick this blue, right? But you might be coming through and you might be saying, well, I don't really like that blue. I actually kind of wish I had, you know, this lighter blue looks a little bit nicer, and maybe I want a green that's a little bit more in this neighborhood, right? And I tend to like to have, and then let's say that he's gonna wear maybe a red jersey, right? So let's do something like this, and we'll pull it over. I don't want it to be crazy red. Maybe something like this. Okay, and then let's say that he's got like a shadow color. So I'm picking a dark and light of each of these. At some point I may come in and add some additional things here. So like his little icon up here, I could make that maybe yellow, right? Because that would be a nice color. But for now, we'll just stick with these, okay? So I would make myself a swatches, and you can turn this off and on. And as I draw, if I'm going to be doing multiple pages, I can take these guys and hit L. I can make a copy of these and can use Control C, and you can Control V them into a new your next drawing, right, in the series, and that way all of your colors follow along. Now you can also set up a swatch library in here simply by going to this plus mark or plus sign, and it'll start to drop swatches down here if you have nothing selected, or into a selected folder if you have a folder selected. All right, so that's one thing that I like to do. Control D will deselect that. All right, so now you've got your swatches figured out. Let's come in here to the background. The first thing I would likely do is, I see people that'll come in and they'll grab every single aspect of this and slowly but surely paint this whole thing out. Remember, in this kind of profession, speed is your friend. All right, so I'm just gonna hit G. G takes me into my bucket, and then if I hold Alt, that's a color picker. So what's the biggest block of color on here? It's probably the sky. So let's grab this guy, and then background color layer. Let's just go ahead and hit that. It didn't pick properly for some reason. There we go. I think that's a issue of the pen that I'm using. All right, so now everything is blue, beautiful, and I can come in here and start grabbing certain areas and coloring them in the way that I want them to be colored. And I'm going to do that with L, which is my lasso tool. I personally, you have a number of lassos. You have a selection brush, which is L, you have a lasso tool, and you have a polygonal lasso tool. I only use polygonal when I need to do straight lines. I really like the regular lasso tool, and I tend, if you look up here at the top left, you have select, you have add select, and you have a remove select, and then you have this like intersection selection. I like to keep mine on the add select, and that allows me to come in. Let me hit 0 fast. Let me blow this guy up just a little bit. There we go. Get rid of that guy. Hit L. And now I can come in. I'm on my background color. By the way, I'm going to lock that. And my PIM color, I'm going to lock, because I'm not using those currently. I'm also going to lock swatches. All right. So by locking layers that you are not using, you don't accidentally draw on stuff that you don't intend to draw on, right? That's in production. Believe me that it's it's easier to do that and then check and uncheck lock than it is to draw on the wrong thing, especially if you do it for like half an hour and then realize, whoopsie, I done buggered up my stuff. All right, so now we've got this. I'm gonna come in and start to make some quick selections. Now, you'll notice it doesn't stick exactly to what I intended. It's pretty close, right? But because I'm still on this plus, I can just come in and say, I want a little bit of that. Hold my space bar, come over here. I want that. I want this bit right there. Beautiful. Maybe I want that, right? And if for some reason I got too much of this, at this point it's fine. So I'm just going to hit G, scroll up here, hold Alt. I'm going to grab this one. Make sure this is not wanting to select things that aren't on the actual layer. And that is because because my picker is set to current layer. So I like to go to all layers, which prevents me from having to jump back and forth there. All right. So let me hit G again. It's being finicky. We've got our color. Here we go. Working as intended. Bang. Beautiful. All right. Now, what I can do, this is separated. I should be able to come up here and grab that. Dump this right there. There you go. I just Control D'd that to get out of it, right? And then jumped into this. Now, I could keep all of this like so. I don't know what I want to do or why that line is even there. I think when I initially drew it, I was thinking this might be a curb and this could be a road. That, you know, these like standing about to leave the park. This allows me to look the way I have it currently drawn. It allows me to look at the drawing and say, do I like this current composition and that's being formed by this strong diagonal? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Currently, I don't really think I do with the dark green here. I think I like it if the dark green perhaps is his shadow. So what do? Just grab your lasso tool. Let's grab this. And I'm being kind of messy in the beginning. Don't feel like you've got to be perfect right away. Z, I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Hit my L. I'm just going to hold my Alt, which removes. There we go. I don't particularly care about the stuff that's inside of his shoe. Doesn't matter because it's all going to get painted over by the character. Another thing that I like to do is I do like to leave little overlaps for the just in case. Now I like to make sure I've got one big solid background. You also notice I'm not really like wasting lots of time being ultra accurate at this stage. Doesn't matter. Why does it matter? Because I'm going to eventually paint all this anyway. Alright, so let me grab that. There we go. Control D. Okay, so now I've got a different look, right? Super fast, not piddling around, just getting the job done. Now as far as color theory, layout, all those things, I would probably come back into here and I would grab, you know, this guy right here. I would try to balance out my greens and pop something in there. I would eventually need a brown of some kind or some sort of color for that tree. Probably need a yellow of some kind. Let's just go ahead and grab it. There we go. I'm going to hit M and hold Alt, which creates a circle selection from the center. Okay, so now I've got this perfect circle. It's roughly the size that I need. And I can re-click in the center there. actually a little bit bigger than I need, isn't it? That's okay. Here's another thing we can do. Pull out like this. Let's see. Oh yeah, look at that. Perfect. G, boom. Got some sunlight. Love it. We want to do maybe like an orange here. I'm just going to use my paint. And you don't have to take your time too much in this beginning stage, right? This is all just background stuff. There we go. All right, bang. Starting to get some stuff blocked in. Again, in the beginning, block things in rather quickly. I'm not using any sort of fancy brush, nothing. Just putting some color down so I have an idea of what I'm looking at. And now you've got the beginnings of an illustration, right? So from here, I would continue on, I would switch over, I would lock this guy, I'd come over to PIM color, and I would start cutting this guy out. Now, we talked about breaking things up, so let's say that I come in here, let me zoom in. I'm just going to do this for the head because you'll get the idea. But if I just hit L and I start to block out this head, and again, like I said, if let's say that your client, or maybe you're the client, maybe it's personal work, that you looked at this and you're like, man, this would be a cool sticker to just have just the head, right? And you'll notice that I'm just going to whip it off like that because I'm on add. So if I start over here, because this is easier for my hand to make a nice clean selection from that angle, I'm just going to continue, grab it. Now what I used to do when I first started doing this is I would try to do one giant selection for the entire thing. And inevitably what would happen is pieces of it would get missed and you got to go back and reselect things, or your pen loses contact ever so slightly and it picks itself up, and then you touch it again and you've lost everything, and then you're playing the undo game. There's no real sense in piddling around with that. So what we have here is the head selection. So what we can do is hit G. Let's say that we're just going to make this whole thing red for now. It doesn't matter what color we choose because I'm just going to use this as a clipping mask. All right, so now you've got this. We're just going to call this PIM head real fast. There you go, instead of PIM color, because I want to show you how to use this as a clipping mask. So now you've got PIM's head, and it's the entire head, right? And then if we came here and made another layer, and we hold down Alt, you can clip this layer to this, right? And then, let me undo my selection so you can see that this works. If I hit B again, let's say that we wanted to change PIM's face to this orange, right? I can just quickly bust this in, and I'm not being super careful. I mean, I'm scribbling way outside the lines here. Doesn't matter, right? Grab this red, just quickly color pick it, lower my brush size just a little. And because I've turned this into a clipping mask, that allows me to draw out here and nothing happens, right? Which is pretty great, you know. So now you've got this kind of look going on, and we can quickly just pop up here into kind of a white. Let's just go kind of ridiculous with this, and Boom. And again, I'm using, in the beginning, just a big flat brush, blocking in shapes. No particular concern for, let me grab this. There we go. Give him a pink tongue. You know, you could do this all through here and let that line work, do a little bit of work. And again, if I scribble into the tooth, who cares? Just hit your Alt and paint a little bit of that back out. I used to do it, and I see students do it all the time, where they will piddle and, you know, really get too deep into the weeds trying to make this whole thing perfect in the first brush stroke, and it doesn't have to be perfect in the first brush stroke. It just has to get done and look nice once you're there. So now you've got this situation going on, right? And another thing that helps if you're trying to keep color theory and some balance going on through here. Remember we talked about we could make this yellow, and we talked about balancing the green with the green, you know, the dark green, light green, and pulling that up into there. What you can do here is come up, grab a color that you already used, right? And paint that in. And if you wanted to, you could, if you really felt like this was necessary, maybe you don't have good hand control, right? You can come in and grab this. You can always use your negative selections to clean your selection up, right? For me, it kind of depends on what mood I'm in, and bang, now you got that. You pop back in, zoop, bang, there you go. And then maybe we grab this tongue color and we paint that tongue. That's kind of fun. Maybe we grab his eye color and paint his eyes. I don't know if this is the perfect color for this, but this is a color block-in stage. Maybe you want this here. Whoops, that's a pen error. Happens a lot. Just clean these little edges up just a little bit if you'd like. There you go. Alright, so you're already cruising right along, and you could do the same thing for the head. And now the cool thing is you have that head isolated, right? And the color is separated from the clipping mask. And you could come in here and then do Pim shirt, Pim pants, Pim arms, and break this whole Pim coloring thing into different blocks, which is pretty helpful. Alright, now that's all lasso tool, bucket tool, using some swatches, right? One thing with swatches, before you save out your image, turn your swatch layer off. I can't tell you how many times I've exported things out and then thrown them into my drive, just about ready to tell a client, hey, I'm ready to rock and roll, and because I'm in a hurry or it's late at night or maybe I haven't had enough coffee, I realize, whoops, I left my swatches on. So I have to go back in, turn my swatches off, re-export, re-upload, all that jazz. Not a huge deal, but just keep it in mind. All right, so next thing, custom brushes. Everybody wants a custom brush. Everybody thinks that the custom brush has a secret sauce to making awesome art. It can, but not necessarily. I mean, if I'm going for kind of a comic book style or children's book style, you can see what you can do with just the world's most basic pressure sensitive solid color circle brush. You just color it in and boxing in colors and calling it a day. And as long as your line work is nice and your color theory works well, then you've got a nice illustration, or the potential for a nice illustration. Um, what do custom brushes help with, though? They usually help with texture. So I've got gobs and gobs of these things. Some of my favorites, let me come in here. I've got some that do some interesting brushwork here. Let me grab a different color and put this onto a different layer. Let's put this above my background. So in this particular case, this brush has kind of a rough patterned feel to it. So it's supposed to have kind of like a texture like canvas, right? Now the thing you can see is if I use it across this huge area, you get this repeated pattern, which I don't particularly like. I've changed this out in my home version of this, but I re-uploaded this. But if you use it sparingly, you know, you can use it to break up areas, like maybe you just want to rough up this edge, you know. If you have the hand paint and get that edge roughed up a little bit, that would be less than fun, right? So you can come in and bust these edges up ever so slightly, add just a little bit of texture here and there, maybe color pick back into the lighter color and add a little roughness to the edge coming in, so you get this neat kind of blending of an edge, right? And you can go back and forth. I've got other ones that do similar things. You know, some of these have like a streak feel to it, right? We talked about that before. Now this one's got pressure sensitive turned on, pressure sensitivity. So you can get some interesting stuff going on if you like. I probably would turn that back off. You have some painterly ones that, again, like this has kind of a nice textury feel to it. This would be better for what we were doing just a little bit ago. I like using these often when I'm doing shadow work or light work. So like, let's come into this head real fast. If I had this guy, let me come in here. I can grab this head. I know it's still clipped here. Let me grab this pink brush. There we go. Now I can come in and start adding some interesting highlights to this hat, right? And I've got my brush, so you see this popping up. I have that set on my pen to right click on the pen, so it automatically pops up and I can just adjust on the fly and then immediately dive back in. So this allows me to get some nice variation of light, and I'll press a little harder in some areas where I think the light hits really solidly, and then maybe make it a little bit bigger and like lightly brush in here in some other areas, right? And then if you don't want that, you just color pick into there and you dust back into those heavy areas. If you got a little too heavy handed, bang, right? Piece of cake. Piece of cake. There you go. And then you could do the same thing across through here. Now the other thing that you can do, if you have gone through and you have been coloring in your areas with these nice big solid colors, you can use your W key and come over here to your magic wand tool, and you can use that to color pick inside of a particular area. So like if I wanted to color pick this guy, it can start to grab just that inside the head, or you can come over here, hold down Control. Something is acting a little wacky. There we go. So this grabs all this. You can do things like quickly remove a selection from there, and then brush into an edge, like let's say I just want this edge, you know, something like that, right? Oops, don't draw on that layer. Helps to keep track again of which layers you're drawing on. So you want that real nice edge. Bang, there you go, you're on that, you hit this. I'm in the light color. Right, and you can make these brushes real nice and big so that you can cover a big area. Maybe this whole side of the hat is getting hit with that sun in that corner a little bit. And then you just paint out the part you don't want. Right? This bottom part didn't get hit because it's on the bottom. Give it that little crinkle look. And obviously right now I'm doing more of like a loose children's book style. So if you're trying something that's a little more realistic, you have to spend more time than I'm spending right now, but not tons, frankly. The more familiar you get with your fundamentals, and then get used to zooming in and zooming out to see if what you've done looks any good, right? I think that looks fine for now. I would accept that as a really nice first pass for this hat. Now, let's just quickly talk about shadows and stuff. Like if I wanted to take this to another level, there's a couple ways I could go about that. You know, I could come in and create a multiply layer or a darken layer, you know, which you'll see about a blue million different tutorials. If you clip this guy into here, go back into your brush tool, and we can actually use the exact same color that we're already using, right? And we should theoretically be able to multiply this over top of itself, right? So I'm just using the red that I've already got, and I painted this into a multiply layer, right? See that? Painted that into a multiply layer with it clipped to the hat already. And then now I can come in and add these shadows in real nice. In the beginning, as you paint, one of the things you'll learn if you take fine arts classes is you try to learn to paint in larger strokes, larger brush strokes. Try not to get so precious with your brush strokes that you lose any sort of expressiveness, right? And there you go, right? Super easy. It looks way better than it did when it was just black and white, generally speaking, right? And you could paint over this guy as well if you wanted to and really bring that hat to life. All right, so you got the head. It's busted out into a couple layers. Pretty simple. Custom brushes. How do you make custom brushes? You make any symbol in black and white, and then you could come in and you define that symbol as a brush preset. I have a video that I should be uploading pretty soon that shows you how to do that. Now the other thing you can do is custom patterns. Again, custom patterns and custom shapes. Custom shapes are great, like if you were going to use this tree, for instance, you could build that entire tree inside a vector, create a custom shape, and you can just paste that shape over and over into your scene and flip it and warp it, maybe put it on different layers, and then paint into those layers quite a bit. All right, the custom patterns, you can do some really cool stuff with those as well. I don't think I have any custom patterns on here right now, but let me see what we've got. So inside of here, there's a pattern tool, right? This pattern tool, if you click here, we can do, let's say like these are rotable textures, okay? So let's say that I wanted this entire thing to have a feel like it's painted on canvas. I could find one of these canvas or canvas-like textures. This one is kind of like a noise. That one's like a canvas. This one's also more like a linen, perhaps. That one's got kind of a linen slash noise feel to it. Noise. All right, so let's trying to find one that's not super repeated. That one's actually not bad. Okay, so we'll go with this guy, and you can change the angle of these things. It's not going to make a huge difference for this particular example, but you can do some fun stuff with it. You can change the size, so if you really want this to feel chunky, you can do so. If you want to reel it in, you can do so. Let's do something that's kind of like this, just for fun, so we can really see it. All right, so you come in here, you make your noise pattern, and usually what I do with this is I would make it into an overlay or a soft light, probably not a hard light. You can do things like screen or color dodge. Those tend to have a little bit more extreme effects, but for me, I tend to like something like a soft light. And now I've got this interesting texture laid over top of the entire thing. Now, this could be a fun way to begin to add that texture in. What I would tell you is, once you have this, generally, because this is a pretty heavy layer, is just come in here and you want to turn this into a rasterized layer. All right, so let's come in here, rasterize your layer. Now it's just a normal everyday layer, and it comes with a vector mask. All right, so what that allows you to do now is come in and say, okay, I like the pattern here, but let's say that we put this over top of everything, which is more likely if you're going to have this color pattern. But let's say that it's a little too intrusive on the face. You can come into your vector mask, grab your brush tool, and let's go into something like this perhaps. Let's try this watercolor brush. Actually, this is a fun one to use, especially large. We'll make it really large, and then so we're on white, which means it's totally on. If I hit X, it goes to totally off. So if I now paint across this, let's say that I'm gonna show you something. Let's invert this. Let's select the mask, come in my properties, I invert this, it turns it all off, right? So we're actually gonna paint the white back in. So now I can come in and say, I just want a little bit of texture here and there, right? Let's kind of drop this in with this watercolor brush and kind of just give it a little feel in a few areas. Maybe I like it on the hat. Sometimes that's all you wanted, is a little texture in one little place, just to give this kind of a cloth look perhaps. Or maybe you wanted it up here in the leaves too, just to give that a little extra texture that is easy to paint in with the texture tool or that texture brush, but you don't want to hand paint every leaf. You just want to imply that there's some stuff up here. All right, so this is a nice way to go about that. Pull it down through the bark perhaps. Okay, edges of these shadows are nice places. anytime you have like a break between light and dark, there's a mid color that happens there. And that's a good place at that point of contrast to have slightly more texture. So yeah, so you could have something along these lines. If there was clouds back here, maybe those clouds have a little bit of texture, maybe they don't. And again, if you don't want it, maybe you didn't want it on the face, you just paint it right back out. Maybe you don't want it on the character at all, so you just paint it right back out. And something like this watercolor brush, or if you don't have fancy custom brushes, you could use anything like these, like a soft round with opacity and flow. So now you've got these larger brushes where you can just kind of ease it in with this gradient, right? And then hit X and ease it back out. Paint it in, paint it out, paint it in, paint it out. Don't be too precious. Try to move fast. Move back from your painting every now and then. Hit your Z, pull it back. See if you like where you're headed with it. All right. So, custom brushes, custom shapes, those things are all fantastic. They're not particularly necessary, but they do help in a pinch, especially if you're trying to get a particular look. It's probably going to benefit you to sit back for a little bit, put the illustration aside, spend an hour or two just making custom brushes that kind of look like what you see in your head. All right, and you have those brushes forever, and if they don't work out, spend another half an hour and make a new thing, or try a different method. Lasso tool, always on add, we talked about that. Custom patterns, again, you can make all kinds of custom patterns. There's some really cool stuff you can do. I'll show you a thing here in a little bit. It's also fun. Clipping masks, we've just talked about what those do. I'm just going through my list to make sure I discuss certain things. Occasionally there's going to be times when you have line work that maybe you're trying to block things in and you need that line work to be pretty sharp. All right, so if that's the case, if you're trying to maybe make some straight lines to block a thing in, for some reason it doesn't want to erase, you can grab yourself a nice brush. I'll increase the size of this a little bit. Let's do it in black. If I'm trying to make a straight line, it's kind of a pain in the rear. If you hold down Shift, you can make perfectly straight lines in 1 degree, and I'm just holding down Shift. It's not going to make an angle, right? I can move my pen at an angle. It's going to pick the closest degree to where you were drawing. All right, now another thing you can do with this, especially if you have one of these like hard round brushes, this is really good for this, and set your pen size down a little smaller. You can click and hold Shift and then click, and I'm still holding Shift, and each place that I click I've drawn a straight line. This is really good for concept work because you can come in, begin drawing, and get all that stuff blocked in really fast with just straight lines. It's also nice for figuring out more complex like city scenes and so forth if you're trying to do some sort of depth or perspective based drawing. So that's pretty nice. Okay, so those are some just quick ways to use the brush to get straight lines if you need them. Gradient and gradient masks. I'm going to assume that if you're at this point you know what a gradient is. You hit G, or if I'm on bucket I can hit Shift G and it's going to give me the gradient. Now in the new Photoshops they have this new gradient tool. I don't particularly like it. I like classic gradient, and I like to have access to my gradient editor so that I can come in here and add all kinds of cool effects in here. and we all generally or should know how to work those, right? So if you say okay and you draw a gradient across things, right, you end up with a gradient. Surprise, surprise. And you have circular gradients, right? You have the ability to reverse a gradient. So if I want to do something like this, bam, right? And you can do maybe like an overlay or a soft light, and it just pulls it in real nice. You can do a multiply, darken, color burn. Some of these get a little crazy, right? So maybe if I do like this, and then you just lower your opacity a little bit, start to pull it down. Okay, all right, so you've darkened up your edges. It's not going to work every time. In this particular case, it looks kind of silly, but that's how you would do something along those lines. All right, so then let's say that we want to recolor this, okay? We're curious what it would look like in black and white. We're curious what it would look like if the whole thing was blue. We're curious if we just changed the whole color palette. There's a cool tool which I like to use, and this is really great if, let me come in here really fast. I'm going to do Control-Alt-Shift-E, which is going to give me a new copy of absolutely everything. Let me throw this on top of all the things and stuff. So I've got this guy. I'm going to hit Control-U and desaturate this completely. There we go. So now I have this desaturated version. Now let's just say that I drew it this way. Some people are better at drawing purely in black and white in order to get the values right the first time. Okay, so you've done that, beautiful. But now you want to say, well, what would it look like if I did some sort of color? Well, you can come in here and go to Gradient Map, which is on the bottom right, and Gradient Map is going to recolor everything inside of your environment or inside of your painting based on which gradient you choose. Alright, so you can do some really wacky stuff with these. Just completely recolor everything. Maybe we go with something like that, right? And it's just using this gradient right here, right? And this recoloring based on what you've told the equivalent for white and what you told the equivalent for black is, right? So white to black, right? And you can adjust these things. So if we have something like this, you can easily come in here and adjust and say, I want more of this pink, I want less of the pink, I want more of the blue. So we start to isolate things. Maybe, where are some of these neutrals? I'm just curious what we've got here. Like these are kind of gross, actually. That's kind of wacky. But you get the idea that it changes out the entire look and feel of this image, right? And the fun thing is you can start off with something like this where you're using one particular gradient map for a large portion of it, right? And then you come in here and you say, I'm going to make a second gradient map. Oops. Click the wrong button. A second gradient map. And maybe my second gradient map is actually going to be in these reds, right? So let's just say that you wanted to do this one here, right? Okay, beautiful. So then we come down and we take a look at these guys and we say, well, what if the head is in red, but the rest of everything else is gray? That's easy to do. I'm going to hold Control, go to PIM head. It automatically selects this, right? I come up here to my color map, and then we can hit G. I'm going to hit like so, Control D, and then I'm going to invert this map. Bang. Right? Now my head has been colored back to the red, and my gradient map for the rest keeps everything nice and gray. So there's really cool ways to play with these, and that's not the end of what you can do with this, right? Because you also have blending modes. So if you wanted to come in and maybe this is gonna, influence the way that works, and then you come into this guy, and now you do some cool stuff like this, right? Maybe we multiply it, darker color, you can do these lightens, that's interesting, I guess, right? And I'm just flipping through them, but from the soft light perspective, the hard light's not terrible. Diffuse, divide, the divide's not bad, it's kind of weird, but right, maybe you just go into a saturation or a color, right? So you can see how these things start to work together, and then you combine these kinds of things with your custom brushes, right? You can come in and say, well, what would happen now if I came in with my brush tool and maybe I grabbed my watercolor brush and I said, well, I don't actually want my tree to be completely grayed out, right? So maybe that's the case. Maybe you want your tree to be pulled back in just a little bit. So you can start to do so just by painting that thing out, right? Kind of cool, kind of cool. All right, start to paint this back in. We have a few things going on here that are probably interfering with each other, but like the fact that we desaturated this background already so that we could fiddle around with that. So let me turn that off. There you go. So now you can see that this one turned everything gray, this one turned his head red, right? And then if I wanted to, let me hit X, turn this back to a bigger brush. There we go. I can paint some of that black and white back in. Which is kind of fun, and obviously we're just playing here a little bit. If I just wanted to dust in a little bit of green, you can do so. I want to dust in just a little bit of that yellow, a little bit of the blue. There's some really fun effects that you can get. Come back to this red. Maybe you wanted to pull some of the red back into this guy. It needs to be that color. There we go. There we go. Give him some red shoes and his red number. Hit X, get rid of that. You can do stuff like this. So a lot of fun uses for your brushes here. This is a really fast way to just kind of imply some color here and there and see what things would look like if they were one thing or another. make those little stripes blue. Alright, super fast way to dive in. Add little bits of color here, little bits of color there. Not being super precious. And bang. Now you've got something. Right? Alright, so gradient maps. I recommend you play with them. I recommend that you play around with duplicating layers, gradient mapping certain bits, masking certain parts in and out. So another thing that you can do, which I like to use to finish off an illustration anyway, is I like to use the old noise trick. And the noise trick helps you to blend some things together. So what that is if I come in and I create a new layer on top of everything, and let's call this noise, right? And you hit G, and I'm going to pick a medium gray, right? So let's come in here and make this medium gray, 50, close enough. So we throw a medium gray in there, and we come into our filters, and we come down, we say noise, add noise, and this is going to give you this nice uniform look. You can do uniform, you can do Gaussian, doesn't much matter. You can do monochromatic. I kind of like having the color in there if it's going to be a color image. So we can do that. You can get really crazy with it and make this stuff really nuts. I'm just going to keep it at 100%, say OK, and then we turn this into an overlay layer. Now you can see pretty quickly that you get this kind of crazy looking static look over your entire image. Now initially this is going to be a bit much, actually it's going to be a lot much, but you just take your opacity, drop it down maybe 25% or 10% or whatever looks good to you. You know, if that's too much, maybe let's get it down to here, right? Now it breaks up that image just a little bit, starts to unify some things. Yeah, gives you a nice little effect. And again, you can always put a gradient mask on this. You know, sometimes I do this and I realize, it messes with the eyes a little too much, or you know, whatever it is, and I'll grab a brush and I'll say, okay, let me go ahead and take it out of the eyes, you know. Let me grab this guy and hit X, and then I'll come in and take it out of here. You know, maybe I don't want it there. Maybe I don't want it on the face at all, you know. So you come in, I've had a few illustrations where this is what I did in order to pull the eye to the face, right? If you have a lot of busyness going on, you can remove some of the busyness, which will sharpen up this area just a touch. And now, I mean, granted, it's one of the more highly painted, detailed areas, so it's going to draw your attention anyway, but you have a different texture going on, which immediately will pull your eye into that region of the painting. So that's pretty nice. All right, so that's how to use your noise, nice noise overlay. There's some other tricks of the trade that you can use with creating patterns or warping patterns by using your transform tool. You can also do fun things in the back that just help to finalize. So like for instance, if this background layer was, if we wanted it to feel a little bit more like a traditional painting, where maybe you had like a burnt sienna in the background. G, let me grab this, unlock it. There you go. So now you got this burnt sienna down here in the bottom. You could come in, grab your entire painting, again, Control Shift Alt E, and it's going to make you a copy. Now this copy is down here, Control Shift right bracket, and that's going to throw this to the top layer. Alright, so nothing to see here yet, but we can always take this dude. I will grab all of this, throw it into a folder, and call this work layers. Alright, and this would be your final layer, perhaps not. Alright, so now you got this guy, and maybe you create some broken up edges, something that maybe with black you come in and you start to essentially erase this guy, right? So we're going to come in and I'm going to start to break apart these edges. Let me turn this off. Right, so you can create these funky let me just do something like this. Now this is starting to make it look kind of like it's like a worn out card or something. Obviously that's a little too much. So you hit your X to pop back over to white, and then you paint some of this stuff back in. Make it a little bigger just to get this done a little quicker. This is a good time also to have mix around with your different brushes. I've got one here, the randomizer. This is a really nice one. This just gives me kind of like a cloud brush, but it's kind of a dirty cloud brush. So I can use it to paint some of this back in or give myself a nice background, right? And this starts to give me that like old school oil painting feel, or maybe you didn't get all the bits, you know, as you were painting, get some of the canvas poking through, or maybe there's, I don't know, some other thing that's back there, right? So that's a fun thing to do if you're just trying to add some final detail to it. I like to make frames and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So as far as tools go, these are some of the tools that I use the most. A lot of lasso, custom brush, custom layer, and just as I said in the first video, work your workflow. You know, create a workflow that's hyper organized, easy to follow. Color layers, shadow layers, highlight layers, use them together, or sometimes, depending on the book that I'm doing, I do just hat layer, and I will keep that hat isolated and paint inside the hat until it looks really nice, and switch off of it, lock the hat, go to my shirt layer, and I'll paint my shirt layer until the shirt looks good. And then I might come back out and do on top of everything, I'll have this final layer, right? And then I'll come over and maybe I bust up some of the final drawing just a little bit to add a little extra flair. So maybe I'll come in here and say, well, wouldn't it be cool if I had, you know, if I worked these guys just a little bit and pulled some extra paint off of that guy. You know, maybe it's something like that. So it's fun to add in some of these little extra brush strokes, liven things up a bit, right? And sometimes you can trace over the ones you've already gotten, add just a little flavor to them. And when I'm doing these expressive strokes, if I don't like it, I just hit undo, and maybe I do it again, right? Pretty easy. And you're adding a little extra life in here, right? Sometimes it's just these little whips. Sometimes you're breaking up the entire edge. Maybe you do something like a texture brush, or there's all kinds of good ones in here. Some of these flat bristles, let me open this guy up. Maybe use something like these rough oils, or let's use this guy real fast. We'll bring it down real small. Maybe use something like that, and you're just gonna come in here and bust this entire thing and like drag some of that color out. Grab some of this, maybe you're pulling some of this color into the hat. Again, not being super precious, just trying to add a little life. Cool. One thing with color theory, if you are trying to make things brighter and you're like, man, it's not really super bright, try adding a little bit of yellow into your white. You'll find that it brightens up that white considerably just by warming it. Especially if you're in a cool environment. Alright, so that's fun. Nice, quick little painting demo. Hopefully this helps. If you have any more questions, feel free to ask. And yeah, hopefully this gives you some ideas on how to use your tools in the future, and hopefully speed up your workflow. Again, practice, practice, practice. Don't necessarily start off with your masterpiece. Just start off with something basic. Try to build up your skills on a cube or a sphere, or just a chunk of a character. If you have a drawing like this sit around, don't worry about getting this entire thing blocked out. Just focus on the hat. Focus on the face in the hat. Focus just on the t-shirt. Nail that. Get your workflow going good. And then once you feel confident in the process, take it throughout and try to make the entire piece cohesive. All right? Good luck and good painting.